So this movie, Android Kunjappan version 5.25, was such a joy to watch. It was so fun to watch this movie. It's really the kind of movie where you just sit back, relax, and you just basically follow the lives and journeys of some of the characters that are presented to you. It was so great. It was such a nice movie to watch. It was so lighthearted, and so the feel-good nature of this movie is really the essence of this movie. But I think it's the kind of movie that you really enjoy on like a Sunday afternoon or a Sunday evening, right before you get back into work or the hectic life that you're living, whatever you're doing. This movie just is a movie that takes the edge off. That's what I would describe it as. I have to start off by talking about this movie's comedy, because this movie is pretty freaking funny. Now, I'm not going to say it's a laughing riot. Like, I didn't find myself laughing the whole time throughout this movie, but there were definitely some great laugh out loud moments. Such great situational comedy in this movie. I got to give a lot of credit to the writing and all the actors that sort of were part of this movie. But some of my favorite scenes really just involved basically the interactions that the community have with this robot. you know, how they're just, I wouldn't say struggling to adapt to sort of accept this robot, but just, the strangeness of it all, of having this android be part of the lives of these people who are quite traditional, I would say. It's really, really nice to see that this was located in a village somewhere in Kerala, obviously. And it was just good to see the interaction, because the movie would have been completely different if it was set in like a major metro, a major city in India. So it was just so interesting to see that. The moments that I really, really enjoyed about this movie, I have to say, the comedy moments. A few come to mind, but basically the ones where they're dressing up the robot, they're dressing up Kunjappan basically, and the ladies are talking about how he should have shame by just walking around naked, which is just such a foreign concept, because we see, the robot as essentially a device, which is kind of what the message about this whole movie is later on. But it was just hilarious to see him gradually wear, clothes, and the different sort of clothing they had for Kunjapan. It was really fascinating to see. It was really, really funny, I found. Some of the small things, like, this is a moment that made me literally laugh out loud when Sakura, Suraj's character, he basically, he asks his son, Subramaniam, played by Soubin, obviously, for the date and birth, the date, time, and date of birth of the robot, the manufacturing date, to get the horoscope. Oh man, I was cracking up at that moment. Really, really funny, because it's just such a wild concept about it's just so foreign that we would see this robot as a certain human being, but that's what the heart of this movie is. The attachment that obviously Basakara has towards the robot. Small things, even like when they mention I think when his friend Prasanna first meets the robot, and he calls him Robert instead of robot, because he thinks he's that's just the name that he thinks that's what he's calling himself. And instantly he thinks he's Christian. So yeah. Some pretty great comedy in this moment, but in this movie. But basically what I like about the comedy in this movie is it all feels genuine, and it all feels like lighthearted. There's a certain goodness towards this comedy that's going on in this movie. Like, there's something really nice about what they're trying to do. The underlying message behind everything is really, really sweet. They're basically trying to accept this android into their community and their life in the way that they would anybody. They don't see the android, Kunjapan or Robert, basically as somebody that's different. And it takes a while to get there. Obviously it takes a while from the main character, played by Suraj again, to really accept this robot into his life and the community's world and everything like that. But yeah, there's something really just pleasant about it. Like, that's why I find this movie really like a nice movie to watch. It definitely hits hard on the emotional beats. And I think that's probably the other shining aspects of this movie. And it happens even before we get the robot even into the picture, right? So again, one of my favorite actors coming into play again, Soubin Shahir. Actually, two of my favorite actors in this movie, Soubin Shahir and Suraj both come to play at this movie. And man, I want to talk about their performances um, a bit later on. But essentially, the little scenes at the start where they're sort of showing the dynamic between Sobin's character and Suraj's character, Subramaniam and Basakara, essentially. The dynamic they have, it's a really nice commentary on basically, the care of elderly people and how we approach taking care of others, especially in a country like India that reveres elders and parents so much, um, towards the later stages of their life. So it was just a great. It was really done. It was like it was really genuine and authentic. There was nothing cheesy or disingenuous about their relationship. You know, it was tough. It was not a loving relationship. They obviously have a lot of back and forth, but there's genuine love between them that they appreciate. So I really enjoyed that fact. And just before we get onto the actual, the main sort of premise, which is the relationship between um, obviously the father and the robot, and the father and the son, the relationship between Sobin, Basakura, and Hitomi, the love interest in this movie, was really well done. It was kind of nice to see Sobin again. I see him in different roles each time I see him, but this one again was pretty different to what I've seen. So he almost at the start is playing like a traditional leading man, like he's a traditional love interest, traditional son, traditional lead in some ways in this movie at the start. So it was nice to see that side of him. Um, Again, props to him. He seems to always have foreigners in his movie in some way or the other. Um, it's just something a bit different, I think. Like Hitomi, I think she's a actress from somewhere up north in India, or somewhere in the middle, maybe in India. But essentially, this is like what the third or fourth instance I've seen him interact with someone that's outside of Indian descent. Obviously, I saw Sudani from Nigeria, where his co-star is someone from Sudan. I'm sorry, from Nigeria. And I think there's someone similar in Kumbalagni Nights as well. There's African girl, African American girl. I can't remember exactly where she was from, but she was also a foreigner. So this is the third instance I'm seeing in like, I don't know, maybe 6 movies so far from um Sobin. But yeah, it's that love interest was really nice. She also played great. She was a really fun, entertaining character. But getting onto the main sort of storyline and the main sort of essence of this film, the dynamic between this father and the robot, Kunjappan, man, that was so well done. I really enjoyed how the whole thing played out. Like it was a real treat to see that journey and how sort of complex it was. You know, it was tough for basically Basakura to accept this robot as the person that's going to help him out because it's just so foreign. Obviously, he's a stubborn old man, and we all know stubborn old men, I'm sure, in our lives. In fact, some of us might be stubborn old men in our lives. But essentially, what we're looking at here is someone that's completely against technology or doesn't appreciate technology, someone from a different class of time. And, there's something about this movie that's nice to watch in today's age where we are more connected to technology than ever before. But we have our central character who's completely distancing himself from technology and values the relationships that he has with people over anything. So that relationship, just seeing that sort of just come together, and how Basakura is basically just learning to accept this robot, and his approach to how he wants to accept this robot is completely different to what a lot of other people would be doing in today's age, because it's so hard for us to actually see beyond the device or see beyond the machine, um, or the function of certain tools that we have. But he just sees Kunjapan as a son so closely, and they get so close towards the end. Um, it's really touching to see that. And there's some parts in this movie that get really emotional. I think towards the end, there's obviously a lot of sadness that comes into play. Some realization to when they realize that this is a robot and can't do more than what we wanted to do. Some real genuine, I would say, there's some realism in that, and something that's probably a bit closer to home what we have right now, because there are other movies that obviously this whole android concept has been played on so many times in Hollywood. In fact, recently there was a big sensational movie that came out called Megan, which it was a horror movie, but essentially played on the same kind of idea with a robot and the relationship between humans and robots. That whole sci-fi element has been played on so many times, but again, as Malayalam movies do, they keep it close to home and they keep it local. By bringing someone like Basakura, he's somebody that you will come straight out of the village in India, um, which is completely genuine to what the relationship we're seeing, which is what separates this movie from other sort of android sci-fi kind of movies. But yeah, I really enjoyed just watching that relationship between the robot, Kunjappan and Basakura. It's just, at the end of the day, it was really, really nice just to see that blossoming. And yeah, the comedy elements added to it. Seeing him walk around with the robot everywhere and how close they were together was really nice. It's even because, yeah, the character himself, Basakura, is pretty complicated. Like, he doesn't accept the robot at the start at all. Um, and he doesn't accept anybody at all, to be honest. It's not even he's discriminating, it feels like. Like, yes, he doesn't like the fact it's a robot, but, the fact that he's against all maids who are from a lower class or something like that. And he's just against the fact of having home care altogether. Like he's someone that's very hard to get the approval of, so much that he doesn't even approve of his son at times. I really did appreciate that as well. The relationship between obviously Basakura and Subramaniam. Um, again, I sort of mentioned it before, but how tough that was for them and how tough it is for Subramaniam to sort of really take care of his father. There are some overtones about this movie about sort of childhood trauma, I think. Essentially, not having the mother in the house and how difficult it was for them to communicate, how difficult it is for two men of a certain age to communicate. Clearly, I think this movie does a great job in sort of telling some of that, as well as some of the elderly care stuff that we talked about before. But yeah, there's a lot to like about this movie. Before I move on anymore, though, I do want to give my shout outs that I mentioned at the start. The special mentions again this time, man. Thank you guys so much for all your comments and all your suggestions, because seriously, like, they lead me down the path of watching movies like this. And, other movies I watched on this channel have mostly come from your suggestions at this point. But thank you a lot to Christy, Sunny. I think you were the first person to recommend me this movie, and your description of the movie was fantastic. When I read that it's about an android and that Suraj is a father and Soubin is playing the son, I was already like confused because obviously the age difference. But yeah, thank you so much for that suggestion. Adash KM, thank you, mate. You've given me so many suggestions. I appreciate all of them. And again, for the third time or second time in a row, Johans. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate all the suggestions you guys are giving. Please continue supporting the channel. I love doing this. And if you're new here, I hope you're enjoying the content. And if you wouldn't mind, hit that subscribe button. Consider it your good deed for the day. But continuing on with this movie, before I sort of close off, I do want to talk about some of the performances in this movie, because there's some pretty special performances in this movie. I've intentionally held it to the very end. I hope you're still around to listen to this. But seriously, Suraj, so impressive in this movie. Even when I first saw him as an old man, complete makeover, complete transformation. I didn't even recognize him in the first scene. After Soubin comes in, then I recognized him in the third scene or something like that when they were together. That's how sort of great a job they did on the makeup, on the prosthetics with the bald cap, and whatever else they did for his face. So well done. Other thing I really liked about this was Suraj was kind of the lead in, like, the number one. Like, I've seen maybe this might be the fourth movie I think I've seen of Suraj, and he's always next to another star, or he's playing like a lead but sub-lead kind of role. Like in Jana Gana Mana, obviously he's the lead in the first half, but then Prithviraj really steps up and takes over in the second half. In the movie I recently saw with him in Bandi Mutul, the name is very difficult to say unless I'm reading it, but the movie that I recently covered where you guys gave the suggestions to, Fahid Fasil is definitely like, the scene stealer, the scene stealer in that movie. So he again is relegated a bit to the side again. In Uni Mukund Associates, he's only in the movie for a short amount of time. So this movie, I think Soubin is probably in the background a little bit. And Suraj is well up front. So this is Suraj's movie, I feel like. And yeah, he was so fantastic. Some of the acting he's done in this movie is something I've not seen from him in my very short watching of him so far. So really great to see him in this role. Really great to see him. I could tell he was just enjoying his role with this because it's just something so different. As I said before, it's confusing to me a little bit as to why he was chosen to be the father to Soubin, considering the age difference is only like 10 years. But reading a little bit into the sort of background of this movie, I think Soubin and the director were sort of primarily in charge, or they basically made the call to get Suraj involved in this movie to play the father. And great choice, because yeah, he was, as I said, fantastic. Some of the aspects I liked about his acting in this movie was obviously he's got the comedic chops, comedic timing. It's all there. He's, so great. But obviously his delivery is so good. The scene, especially towards the climax, is really great. Like when he's delivering the dialogue about, the hardships he's had with his son and the frustrations he's had with his son, playing chess because he wants to have a conversation with him, or not, being let down by not having his wife's, ashes sent to the, water, basically. But then, him reflecting on himself and how he was never able to do those things for himself either. So his delivery was really fantastic. And again, on top of all of this, his physical acting in this, it was so good that basically he's able to convey the struggle and the emotional pain that he had, especially towards the end when he's sort of seeing, um, you know, his new son disappear from his life, and the shock and how he's laughing and crying at the same time. Fantastic! It's such a great performance. He really holds that last scene, that climax scene, on his shoulders, really. Because you think about it, it's just him acting with the robot. Just fantastic. And again, on the other side of things, on the comedic side of things, like the physical acting, some of those laugh out loud moments, again, the scene when he first sees a robot and he's just thrown aback. Wow, I was cracking up. I think I rebounded and watched it again because it was so funny. The reaction was so good. But he was fantastic, man. And again, I got to give credit to one of my favorite guys, man, Soubin Shahir. A huge fan of his. Watched so many movies of his now. I'm losing count at this point. I think he's probably featured the most on this channel. But I'm enjoying him so much. I mean, he probably had lesser a role to play in this movie, but I did enjoy him seeing him as sort of in that romantic lead. Again, I don't think I've seen him in that kind of role where he's had like a relationship kind of blossom or things like that. But my favorite part of his was essentially in that same table scene where they're having a discussion towards the end, when they're trying to basically, convince Suraj Basakara's character to be like, you have to let go. This is a robot. We have to take him back. We can't keep this robot. It's criminal charges and things like that. His role when he's crying at that time and unable to control himself, and when they see the robot with the head taken off, and Suraj again blows me away with his acting. But Soubin as well is so impressive right next to him, being just like trying to control but crying at the same time. Oh my God, fantastic from him. So again, yeah, this is going to be, the show where we're going to keep covering Soubin and Suraj's movies. So looking forward to seeing more from what they have to do. So again, so impressive. I'll wrap it up now. Again, all credit to everyone involved with this movie. The directing was great. The comedy was great. The acting was great. Special mention to the child in the suit of the robot. I'm so glad that they made this, practical and no CGI was involved. I am avidly against CGI from everything that I've seen in Hollywood, and how much I'm seeing the differences now in Malayalam cinema, and how you get real. I think the reason why Suraj is able to act so well, one of the reasons is, one, because he's just so great, but also having a physical robot next to you makes it easy to act rather than a green screen or some kind of dummy prop or something like that. So the kid who was inside the robot, good on you. Yeah, that brings me to the end of my review. I think this has been a bit longer, so I apologies for talking a bit longer than I normally do. But seriously, thank you everyone for watching this. My final rating, of course, is going to be the same as it seems to always be. This movie is about an 8 out of 10. Dynamite kind of movie. My only criticism for this movie, I would say, is I think the second half, and especially the climax scene at the end, was a little bit rushed. Like the emotional punch that I think that we were waiting for, it's kind of just Suraj's emotional reaction to the robot, but the robot goes from like being either side to just suddenly shifting to sort of, the other side right at the end. A little bit quick, I feel. But overall, look, I really enjoy the messaging behind this movie as well towards the end. The whole thing about the memories and how that's all that we have and that keeps us alive. So Kunjappan, even though he's gone, he's never really gone in Suraj's mind. So because of that, I think it's okay. It builds its way back up towards the end. But my only criticism would be potentially that. But look, that'll do it for me on this review. Again, thank you guys so much for your support. Any other movie recommendations you guys have, put them in the comments. I love doing these lighthearted movies. It's a great mix between all the crime stuff I do. So please leave whatever movies you think that I would like, and I'll look forward to covering them off again on the next one. But thanks guys, I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you guys again.